and we'll give everybody just about 30 seconds or so, or another little minute here to join. All right. So it is exactly the top of the hour right now. This is Special Effects Master, an introduction to the films of Ray Harryhausen. And so just to let you guys know, I have everybody muted. If you want to ask a question, please feel free to type it in chat. If I'm going too fast, if I'm going too slow, I don't know. If you need to ask a question, please just drop it into chat and I will be happy to answer that. I also hope to have time at the end so we can have some more questions and have a little discussion via chat about what is about the amazing films of Ray Harryhausen. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, this is the Special Effects Master, introduction to the films of Ray Harryhausen. My name is Matt. I am a writer, I'm a podcaster, I'm a game master. You can find all of my stuff over at dicegeeks.com. Now, I do want to start off and just say a few things. I am not an expert by any means on Ray Harryhausen. I am just a fan. I enjoy his films immensely, and I just want to spread it all around. I want everybody to appreciate his films, and I love talking about them. I love discussing them, but I am not an expert. So if I have some errors or something like that, I do apologize, but I have been trying to do my research the best I can, and I'm sure I'm going to leave out a ton of stuff. There are tons of documentaries and interviews on YouTube that you can watch about Ray Harryhausen's work. If you are interested in diving deeper into some of that, please feel free to do that. They are excellent. Some of them are excellent. Some of them are just people's reflection on his work. Some are interviews with him. Some are full-on documentaries that dive into all the films. So please check those out. Also, on my podcast, I have interviewed John Walsh. He is actually a member of the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation. He is actually in charge of all the artifacts and the armatures from the films. He is the expert. I have interviewed him on my podcast. Excellent interview if you would like to check that out. He is a wealth of knowledge on Ray Harryhausen and the films. So enough of all that. Let's just go ahead and dive in. So here is Ray Harryhausen. He was born in 1920. He passed away in 2013. And really, it all started with King Kong, right? King Kong comes out in 1933, so he was like 12 or 13 years old. He sees King Kong in the theater, and he becomes fascinated with stop motion animation. And just so I can just make sure I'm not leaving anybody behind, stop motion animation is when you create a model of some kind, like you see Medusa here, and you move them ever so slightly. You move them ever so slightly, and you take a picture, and you move them again, and you take another picture, another picture, another picture, and you create the illusion that this model is moving and that this model is alive, right? So that is stop motion animation. Kind of, if you might be familiar, I know when I was a kid, I don't know if kids still do this, but I would take little notebooks or pads of paper and I would draw a stick figure on there or somebody on a bike, and then I would flip those, and right, it would make the illusion that the person is moving. That is stop motion animation, right? And back in his time when he was working, it was a technical challenge. We have improved nowadays to that you don't even need to use it really if you don't want to, but we have improved the technology so much. You can use still cameras. He had to use film, very complicated process. And we'll talk about that as I talk about some of the films. So that's stop motion animation. Hopefully I didn't bore you if you already knew that, but I didn't want to leave anybody behind. Now, this is very interesting because I remember being a kid, right? And I would always stay up late on Saturday night, or was it Friday night? I can't remember, but they always, one channel, right? The UHF station where I grew up, they would play monster movies on the Friday night or Saturday night. And I would stay up and I would watch those monster movies, and I love them. And I think there were like three kinds, right? There were the classics that people regard as classics, like, you know, Creature from the Black Lagoon or something like that, something that's very well known. Then there were some movies that, you know, weren't classics, right? They would just show up and, you know, you'd watch them. It's hard to even call some of those titles to mind, but they were monster movies from the 50s, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s, something like that. But then there was like a third class of these movies. And these movies had like something different in them, and they were magical to me. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that the special effects in all of those movies were done by the same person. They were all done by Ray Harryhausen, but his movies always had just a kind of magical feel to them. And then later on, when I was studying film in college and studying film on my own, I started realizing that these films were all made, the special effects in these films were all made by the same person. And there was this connection between them, and it was Ray Harryhausen. And like I said, what we're going to do here, we're going to just go overview of his main films, and I will cover them and talk a little about them each time. I have everybody muted, as I mentioned. If you want to ask a question about a certain film or something that you don't understand, please feel free to type it into chat. I'll try to get some of those I can answer some as we go along. If you have a specific question about a specific film, or I will save some of them maybe for the discussion at the end when we talk about his movies. All right, so the first one really here is Mighty Joe Young. Now, Harryhausen did not have creative control on Mighty Joe Young. He was unaccredited. It is believed, from what I have read and when I talked to John Walsh, is that Harryhausen did about 80 to 85% of the stop motion that is in Mighty Joe Young. Now, Mighty Joe Young is very interesting because a lot of the creative team that was involved in King Kong is back for Mighty Joe Young. And this is 1949. And a lot of that creative team is back, including Willis O'Brien, who was really the pioneer of stop motion animation, who did King Kong. He did Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost World, which was a silent film in the 1920s, an amazing film, if you want to check that one out. So this is Ray Harryhausen getting to work with like his idol, right? The inspiration for what he wanted to do. So he gets to work with Willis O'Brien here on Mighty Joe Young. Mighty Joe Young, if you haven't seen the 1949 Mighty Joe Young, please do yourself a favor and check it out. It is a very good movie. Very, very high quality, excellent cast. It is still a movie of its time, right? It's still a movie that was made in a certain time, made in 1949, 1948, right around there, released in 1949. So it is a movie of its time. The stop motion animation in it is outstanding. And as you can see here with Joe right here, you know, Mighty Joe Young right here in the center with the lions, the sequence with the lions is absolutely amazing. So it is an incredible movie that definitely needs to be seen. So if you haven't seen it, please do yourself a favor and check that out. But as I said, Ray Harryhausen did not have creative control on this film, and he was unaccredited. However, this next movie, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, this was the first official film where Harryhausen had creative control over a lot, or if not all, of the effects. And this was 1953. It was, this movie was based on, or it was suggested, as the credits say there at the bottom, suggested by a story by Ray Bradbury. And what's interesting is that Ray Harryhausen and Ray Bradbury were lifelong friends. They met, I think, right as they graduated high school, and they were lifelong friends over their love of dinosaurs, their love of science fiction. And I've even heard the quote from Ray Bradbury, who says, when he meets, this friend and they become friends and he goes over to his house for the first time, he shows him a 16 millimeter film that he made of a T-Rex, and Ray Bradbury said, "What an amazing friend to have, who is doing this in his, in his parents' garage or whatever, is making stop motion animation about dinosaurs," which they shared an incredible love for. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, very interesting movie. It has a very early cameo, if you want to call it that, of Lee Van Cleef in a very minor role, but you can see Lee Van Cleef, who became famous in Westerns, later in Hollywood, and in some martial art movies, actually into the 70s and 80s. So you can see him briefly in a minor role here. Sadly, some of the early movies that Harryhausen is involved with, sadly, they pick up this connotation of being low budget and, and heaven forbid, not so great or something like that. But The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms is very interesting. It does have some low budget quirks here and there. The stop motion animation is brilliant. And it is definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it in a while. I have some very vivid memories of seeing, remembering just the creature when I was a child watching some of these late night monster movies. The next movie from 1955 is It Came from Beneath the Sea. This challenge here that Ray Harryhausen was given was to create an octopus, but to save money and to save time. The octopus only had 6 tentacles, but you can't tell, right? You can't tell. There's no way you could tell, but that helped them save money, and it helped them save time. This also marks the first film that Ray Harryhausen worked with Charles Schneer. Charles Schneer would become one of his main producers of his films, and you will see his name over and over again because they kind of formed a partnership, and Schneer was, he really thought that stop motion animation was the way to go. It's the way to create a lot of effects. Back at a time when, people were struggling, we're like, hey, there's a market for monster movies. There's a market for some of these movies, some of these more fantastical movies, but how do you create them, right? Obviously, nowadays, we use computers, we use that, but they were struggling to figure that out. And stop motion animation was one of the main ways that you could really come across with this and create a octopus, a giant creature that's going to, attack San Francisco. Well, you use stop motion animation. So it's a very interesting film. Like I said, sometimes these earlier films get kind of tagged as low budget. But, really do yourself a favor if you haven't seen It Came from Beneath the Sea. Again, just worth it for the special effects. But it's a pretty interesting movie. All in all, you get a very kind of a snapshot into 1955 low budget Hollywood kind of production, and it's a very fun movie. The next one is Earth versus the Flying Saucers from 1956. This is interesting because most of the animation in this is flying saucers. It's not dinosaurs. It's not creatures. It is flying saucers. And really here, playing into a lot of what was going on in the 50s, the atomic era stuff, all the, all the kind of things, that involved all of that, a kind of a looming threat. So we get, are there creatures out there or whatever? We got a lot of these movies like this. But I will say, Earth versus the Flying Saucer here, that Ray Harryhausen destroys Washington, D.C. a long time before Independence Day got around to it. So Ray Harryhausen has his flying saucers pretty much lay waste to Washington, D.C. in 1956, long before Independence Day comes along and did that. But an interesting film. Like I said, just because the stop motion animation is flying saucers and just buildings being destroyed and things like that. This next one here is 20 Million Miles to Earth, 1957. You can see here also that the production of his movies has sped up, right? So we're getting one released every year now. And this movie is very interesting, right? The creature is something that a space probe picks up on Venus and comes back to Earth with. The creature work in this movie is amazing, just absolutely amazing. And the creature, which is called Ymir, has a real personality to it. And it's really fascinating to see that that an armature and a model is brought to life. It is just really brought to life. And the climax of this movie is really great. It's in the Colosseum at Rome, and the creature has a climactic fight. And it is very excellent. Again, like I said, sometimes the more low budget elements are in here. If you're familiar with what's called day for night shots in the old black and white, right? There's some not so great day for night shots that were done earlier in the movie, which is kind of sad, but it was really hard, right? They were trying to do things, they were trying to shoot at night, to make it look at night. So you have variation between day and night. And kind of earlier in the film, there's some that aren't so great that we kind of just have to pass over nowadays. But when the creature is involved, the shots are incredible. The creature work is amazing in this movie. All right, now we have 1958, The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. This is the first movie of Harryhausen's that is in color. I love this movie. I think this might be my favorite of his movies. This movie is so much fun. There's so many animated creatures. There's so much special effects work in this movie. It is absolutely incredible. And you can see here Dynamation written really big up there at the top. This is a process that actually Harryhausen invented. And what it did was it kind of used the old technology of rear projection, but then you would put live action model, people, actors in the middle, and then you would put a matte painting in front. And so what that allowed was it really allowed for the illusion that people and these stop motion creations are really actually interacting together in a very, you know, concrete way, right? This is one of the illusions of film, right? And there is a sequence in this movie. It's obviously a very famous sequence, where Sinbad fights a skeleton, right? The evil wizard brings a skeleton to life, and Sinbad fights this skeleton warrior, and it is done extremely well. It is, the illusion works really well. And the dynamation process really enhances that feeling, because the skeleton warrior is breaking things in the foreground with his sword, and it just really connects the live action with the stop motion model in a really excellent way. There's also some cyclopses along the way. There's also, you know, a dragon and all kinds of other, there's a rock as well, the giant bird, the rock, that is just incredible. I mean, there's just some really excellent work in this movie. This movie is really fun. I showed it to my kids just a few months ago, and they're all like 8, 6, and 5, and 3, and they loved it. They love this movie. The next movie comes out in 1960 is Three Worlds of Gulliver. This is obviously an adaptation of some of the famous, you know, Gulliver, you know, the famous Jonathan Swift work from the 1700s, right? It's going to take a few of those worlds, and we're going to see Gulliver, you know, from Gulliver's Travels, right? We're going to see a few of these worlds. Now, sadly, right, this is the movie that I don't know as well. So this is the movie that I can't say too much about. I saw it when I was a kid. I remember seeing certain parts of it when I was a kid, and then I watched it about 20 years ago when I was really studying film pretty seriously. And it has some interesting, you know, interesting special effects. Most of the special effects are creating the Lilliputians, right? The little people, and combined with our actor, who is normal human size. And then when the reverse happens, right, when he goes to the land of the giants, so he's the little person, right? So this a lot of the special effects have to do with that, and the dynamation process was used to make that more realistic. But of course, there are some other stop motion animation creatures, quite a few of them, you know, an alligator and different things like that. But like I said, I don't know this movie as well. I should watch it again. I'll probably show it to my kids as well once I get a chance. All right, so now we're in 1961. This is The Mysterious Island. And right, if you might be familiar, this is based on Jules Verne novel by the same name, The Mysterious Island. This movie adaptation takes some liberties, I guess you would say, with the source material. I've read the novel, and you know, not much happens in the novel, so I get the movie had to take some liberties, you know, here or there with it to make it a little bit more exciting. But this movie, you get all kinds of stuff. You get giant animals, you get Captain Nemo, you know, giant bees, all kinds of giant animals, all kinds of cool stuff that Ray Harryhausen had, I'm sure, a blast animating. Just so many creatures in this movie. It's just a ton of fun to see some of this. And we also, like I said, we get to see Captain Nemo, who is always fun to see on screen, I guess. And really interesting kind of depiction here of Jules Verne's, kind of gathers up a lot of stuff that happened in Jules Verne, and they put it in The Mysterious Island. But it's a very fun movie. It definitely feels, I will say, it definitely feels like it's from 1960, though. It definitely feels like that, but a very fun movie. If you haven't seen it, really deserves being checked out. All right, now here we get to 1963 with Jason and the Argonauts. I do apologize. I have to take a drink here. I'm a little dry. I apologize for that. So Jason and the Argonauts, widely regarded as one of Harryhausen's best films, right? This was also in 1992. The Academy, right, the Motion Picture Academy, decided to give Ray Harryhausen a Lifetime Achievement Award, the Gordon E. Sawyer Award, the Oscar statuette for a Lifetime Achievement. In 1992, they were going to award that to Harryhausen for his contribution to cinema history, which, by my opinion, was very well deserved. Tom Hanks actually presented that whole sequence. There's a clip of it online. You can watch the whole kind of like 7-8 minutes of the presentation of the Oscar and the award to Harryhausen. Ray Bradbury is there as well. And Tom Hanks, one of the most famous moments, Tom Hanks says that, some people say, his quote was something like, some people say Citizen Kane, some people say Casablanca, but he says that Jason and the Argonauts is the greatest movie ever made. And of course, there is some, nervous laughter and giggles in the audience there. But Jason and the Argonauts is an epic movie. It is quite interesting film. The stop motion animation in it is as always amazing. Harryhausen was just pushing himself, right? He was just looking for ways to just push himself and push himself and push himself into more and more challenging, models and more challenging situations. So in Sinbad, in the seventh voyage of Sinbad, Sinbad fights one skeleton warrior. Well, Harryhausen in Jason and Argonauts, he's going to up that. There's going to be like 6 or 7. And they're going to have to fight all of these skeleton warriors, right? Actually, this picture right here, I don't want to take it down because I'll probably mess something up, but that picture right there is that famous sequence of Jason fighting 6 skeletons, and it is autographed by Ray Harryhausen, which is very cool. But Jason the Argonauts here, very famous for the giant bronze statue that comes to life and picks up the Argo with Jason and his crew on it. Very famous for that sequence with the skeleton warriors. What's interesting, what I find really interesting about some of Harryhausen's work is that he just takes different mythological, creatures, beings, or stories, some of the Greek myths, or even Sinbad. And then he combines a lot of them, right? So he combines kind of the bronze statue with, the idea of the Colossus of Rhodes, the skeleton warriors from different, he kind of combines a lot of these elements. And he's not afraid to mash up some of them. In Sinbad, right, there's a Cyclops, but the Cyclops is also a satyr, right? It also has goat legs, right? So he's just not afraid to mix up some of these mythologies and to create some interesting worlds that are really, kind of like his own, right? And so Jason and Argonauts really lauded as one of his best films, and with good reason. It is very excellent. All right, The First Men in the Moon. Of course, this is based on H.G. Wells, a famous H.G. Wells novel, or novella, something like that. This movie is is interesting for a number of reasons. Um, um, it has a lot of kind of comic relief in this movie. There's a lot of kind of the crazy English inventor kind of idea, who this mad scientist, I guess, and he's always kind of doing something silly or funny. Um, uh, and there is a lot of setup to the film before we start to see some of the stop motion animation. Uh, that would be kind of my one critique of this one, but still the creations are very good. Some of the comedy does work. I guess they should probably put a disclaimer, because I do probably think some geese and chickens were harmed during the filming of this movie, because and if you watch it or you know it pretty well, you know what I mean. There are some funny places, but they might want to put that disclaimer on the movie. But the idea behind this one, of course, there's a modern day moon landing for 1963. An international group is landing on the moon, but of course, what did they discover? They discover a British flag and the date 1899 on the moon. So somebody has already been to the moon, and they have already claimed it in the name of the Queen. And we get kind of an interesting, kind of moon, moon society here, with some beings that live on the moon. There's some interesting ideas there. A fun movie, definitely worth checking out, especially if you really want to see some of his stop motion animation on the moon, but not as much stop motion animation as you might think, or not, certainly not as much that was in like Jason and the Argonauts or Sinbad or something like that, but still very interesting. All right, well, next is 1 million years BC. This is kind of one of the, it's an interesting kind of note in the catalog here of Harryhausen films, because this one was not produced by Charles Schneer. This was a different production. If you've ever seen this movie, you know that, I mean, it was basically just a Raquel Welch vehicle movie, right? And you get to have her, in a fur bikini kind of thing. Harryhausen's effects are very good in this movie, though, and he creates a lot of dinosaurs, some pterodactyls, a lot of things like that. Very interesting. The movie is, it has some, I guess, some maybe strange interpretations, I guess you would say, of what cavemen might have been like, or something like that. There's also a few sequences where the producers and that cut in some monsters, like some lizards that are just normal sized lizards, but they make them look big. And apparently Harryhausen hated that, and he was very upset that they cut in, a lizard and just made it look big through camera tricks, while he was working on, doing his stop motion animation, which is quite good. So it's definitely should check this out if you're not familiar with this movie, or you really like dinosaurs, because there's a lot of dinosaurs in this one. And of course, the next one, we get 1969, we get the Valley of Guangzhi. We get more dinosaurs, but this time it's not cavemen and dinosaurs. This is cowboys and dinosaurs, right? So we have a very kind of a mix here of Wild West with dinosaurs. There is kind of this Valley of Guangzhi, which is this lost valley concept, right? That prehistoric animals live in this valley that's just out in the West here, and nobody's discovered it until now. And this movie, this is probably my second favorite. I really like this, along with the seventh Voyage of Sinbad. This one lives in my memory too, because I had this memory for a long time when I was a kid. I just very clearly remember a T-Rex in like a Mexican bull fighting coliseum. And I had this memory of a T-Rex, a dinosaur, in like this bullfighting arena. And I couldn't figure out where it was for a long time. But about 20, 25 years ago, I finally figured it out. It is the Valley of Guangzhi. And I've watched it a number of times since then, and I really enjoy it. Again, just a few months ago, I showed it to my kids, who, the oldest is 8, so they're pretty young still. And they all really enjoyed it. I mean, there are some other prehistoric animals, but man, you also get the star of the show, this T-Rex. And the end climax is really, really great. And so the Valley of Guangzhi from 1969, definitely an excellent film to check out. All right. So now from 69, we jump to 73, and we get the Golden Voyage of Sinbad. So Harryhausen is kind of returning to Sinbad here. And I showed this to my kids as well. They liked the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and Valley of Guangzhi a little bit better than this one. This one's a little darker. And so I can get why the kids wouldn't like it. Harryhausen here again is just really pushing his work, right? Really pushing stop motion animation. We have the statue up here of Kali with the 6 arms and swords, and of course you have a 6-armed statue holding swords. What are you going to do? You're going to have a fight with that, right? You're going to have a sword fight. So really great stop motion there. And then kind of up in the corner over here on the right, you can see a griffin, and you can see this centaur-like cyclops creature. They have a big climactic fight, which is really, really exciting, and the work in it is just tremendous. The animation work is really great in that. Then the next one, we jump to 1977. This is Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. We're back to Sinbad again, but we have a different actor and playing Sinbad and all of that. But this movie really, again, kind of goes, Harryhausen just animated all kinds of creatures for this movie, just all kinds of different things. You can see up on the right, we get like a troglodyte. There's, a tiger, of course. It's the Eye of the Tiger. Down in the bottom right there, you can see the Minotaur looking like creature. It's called the Minotaur, and it is a bronze statue of a Minotaur that is brought to life by our evil witch here. And she puts a heart of gold and bronze that's magic inside this bronze statue of a Minotaur, and the Minotaur comes to life, right? And this statue comes to life. Really, really excellent work here. Very fun. I haven't showed this one to my kids. It gets a little bit more mature, so I don't know if I'm going to show this one to my kids until they're a little older. But it's very interesting, very very detailed stop motion work again from Harryhausen. And then we get to 1981, The Clash of the Titans. I find a lot of people who grew up in the late 80s or in the, grew up in the 80s will have memories of this movie and they may not know where it comes from or something, and they'll be like, what was the movie that had this and that, and you're like, oh, that was Clash of the Titans. So Clash of the Titans here, right? This is another example of Harryhausen, kind of mashing together all some Greek myths and everything, but not feeling, kind of chained by them or not feeling restricted by them, right? We get the amazing Medusa, right? Like he has to animate all of those snakes, right, by hand, right? And we get Medusa, who lives in the underworld, which that's not part of the original myth, but hey, it works. Why not? We get Perseus, who captures the Pegasus, which doesn't happen. I think it's Bellerophon or in the original myth. But who cares? Get the winged horse in so you can animate a winged horse, because Pegasus is awesome. And then, there are so many special effects in this one. Also, of course, you get the Kraken, right? You get release the Kraken, and Perseus has to defeat the Kraken, right? And there are also many, many other special effects in this movie that are really great. There's a mechanical owl that is a lot of fun, probably heavily influenced by R2-D2 or C-3PO at the time, right? You got to have a cute robot or something, but still the stop motion animation work on the little owl is tremendous. And this is, probably one of his more famous movies. People can probably name Clash of the Titans or Jason the Argonauts. Some of the other movies kind of get a little hazy there in some people's memories. But sadly for us, right? Sadly for fans, Clash of the Titans was Ray Harryhausen's final film, right? A lot of the movie studios, right, the special effects industry had kind of really moved on at the time, and it was skeptical in the past in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, but it had really, special effects had really moved into different areas. All that being said, right, some very, very famous movies use stop motion animation, notable, right? Empire Strikes Back, or the Empire Strikes Back, right? The AT-ATs, right? With stop motion animation that was done by Phil Tippett, if I'm remembering correctly. But then also some of the low budget Hollywood movies, if you're, kind of say low budget, but independent films, I should say, of the 80s and early 90s that use stop motion animation. Some of you may be familiar with like Charles Band Productions, Full Moon Productions. They used stop motion in those, but Harryhausen did not make another film. He pretty much retired after 1981. There were rumblings of other movies that were supposed to get made and things like that, kind of along the way, even an X-Men movie at one point in the mid 80s, but none of that happened. And so yeah, Clash of the Titans was the last film that we got from Ray Harryhausen. We have about a little bit more than 15 minutes left of our time. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them into chat and I will try to answer those. I hope the presentation was informative. And all that. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I just really love a lot of his movies, love a lot of his work. So if you have any questions, I would love to have a discussion about his movies. If you have a specific, if you have a specific question about a specific movie, I'll try to answer some of those. As I take a drink here, I'll hopefully let some questions pop up in chat. Oh yeah, somebody asks, it says, since you covered his feature work, can you talk a little about his short film, 2002 Tortoise and the Hare? Yeah, that is right. There are some shorts that he put out. He did some work on shorts, early in his career. But yes, there was a short film that came out in 2002 that was kind of put together with. I believe the project was started way earlier, but they finally some people kind of gathered together. Right now he's very famous and he says, hey, let's put this together. Sadly, I don't know too much about it. I have watched it and I have watched a documentary on it, but I don't know too much about it. I think it was some fans were like, like fans in the industry were like, do you have anything else? And he was like, well, I got this. And so they put that together. But yeah, I don't know too much about it. Like I said, I did watch it and I have seen a documentary about some of it being pieced back together, but I don't know too much about it. So I do apologize for that. So somebody says, is there a book you can recommend about it? There are a number of books on Ray Harryhausen now. I'm trying to think of a good title off of the top of my head. Well, there is actually John Walsh, who I interviewed on my podcast. He actually wrote a book called The Lost Films of Ray Harryhausen, and that was about some films that just didn't get made. That's where I learned about the X-Men movie that didn't get made, and there was a number of other ones. So that would be a good book to check out. It's very cinematic. It's a very big book with a lot of pictures and images of his work in that. So that is one book. There are a few others, but I'm just not, I'm blanking kind of on the title, but I'm sure if you just head over to Amazon and type in Ray Harryhausen, you'll find a number of other books as well. So somebody asked, any idea how many pictures per second he used? 12, I think, is the minimum or more to make his sequences. Yeah, as far as I know, the standard Hollywood film back in the day for normal looking film is 24 frames per second. So that's what looks normal to the human eye. That if you would have used 12 frames per second, right, what would that be? That would be sped up, right? That would be fast motion. That would be like speeding up the camera to do that. According to the knowledge I have, or what I know, I think he did 24 frames per second. I'm sure if he was doing slow motion, he would have used more than 24. And if he was doing fast, he would have used less. But I think he did most of them in 24 frames per second. And you start getting an understanding of how complicated stop motion animation would be. And it's also my understanding that on the vast majority of his films, he did all of the stop motion work himself, right? He did all the lighting, he did all the exposing of the film, the building of the armatures, and the movement of the armatures by himself. I think on Clash of the Titans was one of the films where he actually had a couple of assistants work with him. But before that, it was just basically him. And yes, the follow-up is amazing. He had to do 24 different poses for each second. So, patience is a virtue. Absolutely, right? Like, I mean, even with my just noodling around with stop motion animation or just playing, well, I mean, I studied film back in the day when I went to college and I did some filmmaking back in the day, but like playing with stop motion animation now with like my kids, yeah, I don't have the attention span to do 24 frames a second on something. So that is amazing how he was able to do that. You have to be so patient. And back in the day, right, you have to also understand, right, he's exposing a roll of film. Okay, so he has a whole roll of film. Maybe that roll of film is only a minute long, but you can start doing the math and see how many frames that is. If you make a mistake on a roll of film, you have to throw that whole roll of film out. You can't, there is no going back on that roll of film. So he had to be meticulous. He had to be careful. Nowadays, right, like a stop motion animation picture like The Corpse Bride, you use a still camera, right? We use a still camera to take a digital image. You mess up a frame and you're just like, so what? Right? Like, I just discard that one image and I can use all that came before that. But if he was working on a roll of film that came in a minute long, 5 minutes long, 10-minute long roll of film, and you made a mistake, that, you know, that's that whole roll of film that's done, that's gone. So he had to be meticulous with that. And yes, the follow-up in chat is like, I can see why the octopus had 6 tentacles instead of 8. Absolutely, right? Because you would get quite involved, right, trying to do all 8 of those. So hey, let's just save some time, save some money, and nobody's going to notice, and you certainly don't. All right, well, we have 10 more minutes left. I'd love to discuss some more questions. If anybody has any more questions, you can please just type them into chat. You know, and I do apologize. Like I said, I'm not an expert, so I can't really answer some things, but if you have some specific questions about some of his work, I'd love to talk about it. Maybe what are some of your experiences with Ray Harryhausen? When did you first see a movie of his, or what's your favorite film of his? Those would be good to talk about too. Does anybody have a favorite? Did he, okay, here we go. Did he ever make a cameo in any of his films like Stan Lee has in the past? And my favorite is Sinbad. And so this person is saying my favorite is Sinbad, the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. Like I said, that's my favorite as well. So thank you. To my knowledge, he did not make a cameo in any of his films. He did have a cameo in the remake, the 1998 remake of Mighty Joe Young. He did have a cameo in there. I think he's in like in a nightclub or a bar sequence or something like that. And then his voice, he makes a voice cameo in the movie Elf. If you remember when Buddy is walking around in the North Pole, Buddy comes across a stop motion walrus that pops out of the ice and kind of says, "Hi, buddy." That voice is Ray Harryhausen, because obviously Jon Favreau, who is the director of Elf, is a huge fan of Ray Harryhausen, and he put that in there. He was putting just a stop motion walrus in there to give the North Pole kind of a feel, you know, a cartoony feel. And so he had Ray Harryhausen ask Buddy, "What's up?" or "How's it going, buddy?" using his voice. So somebody in chat has posted National Galleries, an exhibition of some of Ray Harryhausen's cinema. And I'm sure that is a great resource. There are some great resources. Like I said, there is a foundation that has the armatures, that has Medusa, that has the skeletons, and that foundation does put on events occasionally. So certain places around the world, at certain museums and galleries and different events, occasionally they will have some of those on display, and you can go and see some of those. Any other questions? We got like 7 minutes. Anybody else want to tell us their favorite? All right, so somebody asked, do you know if there's any archive of Ray's earliest films, the ones where he learned animation and showed Willis O'Brien way back in the day? I believe some of them are on YouTube. There are, like I said, there are a number of documentaries about Harryhausen that are just free on YouTube to watch, and some of them include clips of some of his short work. And yeah, I didn't mention a lot of his short work, but he did some short films and tests that that people that he showed some of the people, and they were blown away by. Yeah, absolutely. So you can find him on YouTube. Um, you can also probably rent some documentaries. There are some very in-depth documentaries about Harryhausen and his work. Somebody else posted a YouTube video about the National Galleries. I'm sure, yeah, absolutely, a lot of stuff. So here's a question: did he ever interact with the actors behind the scenes? To my knowledge, not too much, although they did plan out the sequences, right? You have to plan out the sequence. You can't leave anything to chance, right? You can't just go in and improvise a sword fight with a skeleton, and a human actor, right? You can't do that. So to my knowledge, he didn't interact with them much, but they had to plan out all of these sequences. So that's actually a really great question to learn more about. And then the person also said, as far as the favorite is the Golden Voyage of Sinbad, because Tom Baker is in it, and that's Doctor Who fans. And then also Sinbad, Eye of the Tiger, because Patrick Troughton was in that one as well. And that is for the Doctor Who fans. And then somebody else says, try the Internet Archive. I don't know whether any of his films are there, but a few years ago, I watched a few 40s Batman serials on the site. Yeah, some of them, if you go to the Internet Archives, you might be able to find some of the films all there. Although I think most of his films are still in copyright, are still under copyright protection. Some of those Batman serials were probably just released into the public domain. A lot of studios have done that. They just don't want to keep those films on their rolls because you have to re-up the copyright all the time. So those Batman serials were probably released into the public domain, but most of Harryhausen films are still very much protected because he has built up such a fan base around his work. But again, a lot of the short work you can find on YouTube. Fantastic documentaries. I'm blanking on some of the names for some of the documentaries, but just fantastic documentaries that really dive into how he started doing this in his parents' garage when he was a kid, and how him and Ray Bradbury became friends. All fascinating stuff. So I definitely urge you to check it out. They also have the Ray and Diana Harryhausen Foundation also has a website where you can learn more there. A lot of his movies, since a lot of his movies were released through Columbia Pictures, which is owned by Sony. Sony is, like, you may know, Sony is like one of the main studios that does not have a streaming service or platform. So some of the movies might be hard to see because Sony hasn't done a streaming platform or anything yet, and that is owned by, and Columbia is owned by them. But there are some movies that are available out there on Prime or on Crackle. I found First Men in the Moon on Crackle. It's a streaming service. I didn't even know anything about it until I found it there. So I think Jason in the Argonauts is on Tubi, another streaming service. You can find Jason and the Argonauts there. And then, of course, Valley of Guanji, I think I had to rent that for just like $3 or something on Amazon. But some of them are out there on different free streaming services. You'll probably have to watch ads with them. But, I mean, who cares? The movies are great. All right. Well, we have like 2 minutes left. Anybody have any last question? I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully you enjoyed the overview. It would be good to get a little feedback. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Yeah, and somebody else posts in the chat, if you just go to IMDb and search his name, you will see a lot of his movies listed there, and you will also see perhaps where they are streaming and that as well. So you can kind of figure out if some of them are streaming. Thank you so much. Okay, so somebody said fantastic discussion. Thanks. No problem. It's my pleasure. I love looking into this stuff. I love watching these movies. It was just an excuse for me to do more research and to get to know his films better. So I had a lot of fun putting it together. We're down to like the last minute or so. Well, thank you. Thank you. Somebody says this is good history for young filmmakers. Absolutely. If you're a young filmmaker and you haven't heard of Harryhausen, or you haven't really studied his work, it is definitely worth your time. Some amazing stuff. All right. Well, somebody says, thank you for the presentation. He said cover Harryhausen in his history, his animation history class, and that I gave a great overview of the features. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Like I said, I am not an expert, but I just love all of this stuff. I love his work, and I just find it so fascinating. Well, we are coming up here on the time, just like 10 seconds or so. So thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, this has been recorded and I will be posting it on my YouTube channel. I'll be dropping the link to that in the messages at Gen Con, so you can find it there. And we are over time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining today.